I recently met with a young man who was very troubled, but he was not sure that he had religious OCD. His parents actually brought him in on the call. And as I was meeting with him, I asked a question. I said, "What kind of spiritual compulsions do you have?" And he thought about it for a second and he said, "I don't think I have any compulsions." And his mom jumped in and she said, "Of course you have compulsions. All those times that you're in your head trying to figure out if God hates you, trying to figure out if you're going to heaven or hell, that's a compulsion. Ruminating on that stuff, that's a compulsion." And of course, I couldn't have said it any better myself, but yet this young man had not yet thought of it in that way. And it was something that he was still processing to determine if indeed his rumination was a compulsion. For the Christian with OCD, spiritual rumination often flies under the radar as a form of compulsive behavior. And there's a couple reasons why. First of all, rumination, it's invisible. It's not something that can be externally observed by others. It can't be marked down on some sort of assessment form for why you're not getting to work on time, or why you're not performing well on the job, or why you're not connecting with others in intimate relationships. It's very hard to pinpoint what's happening because nobody else can see what's going on. You might even be able to multitask while you're ruminating. There's plenty of people in the OCD recovery community that will readily say that they will sit there ruminating in their mind while they're talking to another person, and they've just mastered this ability to like nod and say mm-hmm, 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 and in their head they're working on their big problem of the day. So ruminating is invisible, and that's one reason it can be very easy to miss. The second reason it often flies under the radar is that it feels like the right thing to do. And the reason that I say that is spiritual rumination and spiritual inquiry often look like the same thing on the surface. Spiritual inquiry is like that searching for that pearl of great price, and you're searching and you're digging and you're wanting to find that precious truth that God has in his word. That is spiritual inquiry, and it's a very good thing to do. Spiritual rumination also has kind of a similar vibe because there's a lot of searching and there's a lot of spiritual overtones to it. But inquiry and rumination are not the same thing. And so it's very hard to detect the difference. And for the person that's ruminating, often I see individuals who continue to remain committed to their rumination process on the one hand, even though they're on the other hand trying to get better from OCD. And there's this tug of war. Why? Because the spiritual rumination feels like the right thing to do. It feels like a moral and spiritual imperative to do that. And if they withdraw their mental efforts from the rumination, it feels like negligence. It feels like being a bad Christian. And so there's just all of this back and forth in the mind as to whether or not this is a legitimate spiritual activity to continue. So again, that's why another reason why rumination often goes under the radar as a form of a religious compulsion. The third reason why we may miss it is that it may be falsely encouraged. And what I mean by that is you may have a pastor or a parent or a spouse who might tell you, I mean, not having much information about religious OCD, which is, by the way, part of the reason why I have this channel and I have my website, is to raise awareness about this problem. Many people don't have that awareness. And so they're trying to help, they're trying to do the best that they can. And they say, you know what, you need to pray more about this thing that's bothering you. Maybe you need to go up for another altar call, or maybe just keep studying this until you have peace about it. And there's that inadvertent, accidental, unintentional push into the OCD. Like, it's an encouragement to keep engaging compulsively with your OCD. And you may get that from loved ones in your life, not because they have any bad intention, but simply because there's this lack of awareness about religious OCD, and that there are real differences, like I mentioned before, differences between spiritual inquiry and spiritual rumination. One verse that I really like on this topic is from 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 33, which says, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace. The context of 1 Corinthians 14 is about church order, specifically about speaking tongues in a church setting, a public setting, and how that can be done in a way that edifies others and glorifies God. Now, I know there are different viewpoints and different theological positions about speaking of tongues. We don't actually need to go into that at all to get the core context and what Paul is trying to say when he says God is not the author of confusion but of peace. In that whole chapter, what we see is a push towards orderliness. As it says in verse 40, that all things be done decently and in order. For things to be done decently and in order in that setting of spiritual inquiry, this is for one overarching purpose, that God wants to be known, that God wants to reveal himself in a way that will be clear and understandable and implementable, whatever it is that we're reading or hearing about in that church setting. God is not trying to be hidden. He's not playing hide and seek. He's not trying to make things confusing or difficult. The whole self-revelatory urge of God is there for the purpose of you being able to know him and to receive him. As it says in John 17:3, this is eternal life, that we know him. To know God is to love him. To know God is to experience him deeply in a salvific way in our lives. And so God doesn't want to be hidden. Spiritual rumination is built off a theory of God's hiddenness, of the crucial spiritual information needs to be discovered, and it's not easy to do it, so I have to keep trying in different confusing ways to unearth the spiritual truth. And that is completely the opposite of what the Bible describes in terms of God revealing himself to us. It's not meant to be confusing and difficult. It's meant to be plain and straightforward and understandable to us. So if you find yourself having a mental pattern that is looping, labyrinth-like, confusing, self-contradicting, repetitive, or fruitless, that might be a pattern that should not be and cannot be attributed to the working of God's Spirit in your life. Rather, that can be attributed to something called religious OCD. That is, I mean, there might be other reasons as well, but that is a pattern that is absolutely endemic to religious OCD, these kinds of thought patterns. And by the way, I just mentioned self-contradicting. I don't know if you relate to this idea, but I just want to point that out more in detail. Spiritual rumination often has the quality of being self-contradicting in the sense that one thought will come into our minds and we latch onto it, but then another thought will come in that contradicts the first one. So then we develop this tug of war in our minds, and the tension is never resolved. It just continues contradicting itself in our minds. And that's what part of what keeps that looping, repetitive nature going. God is not like that. And we need to recognize that that is a very, very common form of the way spiritual rumination works. Here's a really simple litmus test that you can try out to see if what you're experiencing might be spiritual rumination rather than spiritual inquiry. The test goes like this. You have that question or that uncertainty that you're trying to solve in your mind. And all that you do is put it down and walk away from it before you've reached a satisfactory answer, and gauge your response. What happens? What do you do when you try to walk away from it? Can you walk away from it? If you literally, physically cannot walk away from it, that's already 100% you're dealing with rumination, because that's the typical way that our brains respond when we've been chewing on and morbidly ruminating, and you try to take away that candy from the baby, there's going to be a really, really strong reaction. But generally, the two main responses that I see is number one, extreme and increasing and escalating anxiety. You walk away from the unsolved question and it's like, I can't handle this. My brain doesn't have a way to accept that uncertainty. So there's a freak out that happens. The second way is a little bit less common. And it's less talked about. That's why I wanted to highlight it here, because it happens enough for it to be a thing, okay? Where sometimes what I'll see is, I don't have any better way of describing it other than saying existential collapse. And what I mean by that is if you force yourself to walk away from the unsolved uncertainty, or if you've been going at it for so long that you finally like you have no other response other than to walk away from it. Sometimes what I will see in different individuals is this existential collapse of realizing, like, I can't solve this. And if I can't solve this question in my mind, then I have no reason for being alive. I have no purpose for existing. And if I have no purpose for existing, then why should I even? And it just kind of boils over into this really messy existential situation. Often I will see accompanied with that a lot of anger, a lot of avoidance of just avoiding spiritual things to try not to think about it in any sense. Sometimes personality changes as that individual is coping with the existential stress that they're under in that sort of situation. So those are the two main responses that you might get in walking away from an unsolved question. You may have really extreme anxiety, or you may have that existential collapse and the uncertainties of what your life even means in a place of not being able to answer that question. Both are very, very uncomfortable places to be. But if you notice that, then I think it can be very helpful in just determining, hey, this isn't spiritual inquiry. This is spiritual rumination if I'm having this kind of response. And as such, having that response is actually a freeing thing. Don't be afraid to encounter these kinds of difficult things. Remember that Jesus said, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." There's a freeing thing that happens when we encounter ugly truth. We encounter and we're like, oh man, this is not a normal spiritual thing. This is actually spiritual rumination, which is a bad thing. And there is a fearfulness that comes with that, but there's also a freeingness because now that you know what the problem is, then you can begin looking at the solution. I had a friend that said once that a clear identification of the problem is already half the solution. And I do believe that that's true. So now I want us to look at the solution. If you are stuck in spiritual rumination, what is the solution? Well, before I get into that very deeply, let me just say that the answer to this, I mean, spiritual rumination is a really big topic, and the answer to it in a very big way is it's a systemic approach that you have to take. I go into that very deeply in my masterclass online and in my weekly group coaching support sessions, where we're looking at those deep underlying patterns like our icky aversion to uncertainty. Why is that? Where does that come from? And how do we deal with that aversion? We talk about our intense emotional reactions to these questions and how that is supercharging our behaviors. We talk about that inflated sense of personal responsibility and how that's driving our need that we have to be the ones to take care of these problems rather than being able to turn it over to God. So it's a systemic problem, and it's one that we talk about in its deepest patterns more in my masterclass. So if you've not seen that, if you've not really encountered some of the work that I do with group coaching, I would encourage you to look into that just for that more intensive weekly care that you might benefit from. But I want to give you something that is clear and actionable and something that you can walk away from this video and actually do right now today that you can see immediate impact and difference. I want to share with you what I call the OCD curve. Now, if you are already part of my group coaching community, you've already seen this because I know we go into this a lot. This is a core component in my group coaching, and I figured, hey, you know what? I need to mention it at least once in the YouTube channel because I don't think I've mentioned it before, and this is really, really crucial. So let me just draw the curve here. Here's what I call the OCD curve, and this direction represents time, and this direction represents the intensity of our emotions and the experience that we're having. Okay, so here you are, you're going along in your day, and all of a sudden something triggers you. Okay, so here's your trigger point that is starting somewhere here at your baseline. Now, some people's baseline is lower or higher. Some people have a consistently highly anxious baseline that goes from highly anxious to extremely anxious. Some people have like a fairly normal baseline. Anyways, you know what your baseline is. But here we go, we get triggered. And so as soon as we get triggered, what happens? our anxiety goes up. We feel those palpitations, we feel the nervous energy. And so we're like, I have to do something to get rid of this inner turmoil and experience that I'm having. And so what do? We do a compulsion. And in this video, we are talking about spiritual rumination. So I get in my head and I'm like, I have to solve this. I have to come up with ideas that will neutralize that. And I have to dredge up long forgotten Bible promises that may encourage me right now. Or I have to think about, and by the way, Bible promises are wonderful. Bible promises are just an amazing way that we're living by faith. But for the person that does spiritual rumination, promises and verses, the verse of the day or whatever, those can all be ways that we are trying to leverage our anxiety. We're trying to crowbar it out of our lives rather than allowing God to be the one who removes our anxiety for us. And all of that becomes obsessive compulsive very fast. So, anyways, here we go. Anxiety goes up, and we say, I need to ruminate on this. I need to figure this out. And we ruminate, whether that is scrolling on articles on Google, whether that is listening to encouraging videos on YouTube, whether that is calling your pastor or talking to your parents or talking to your spouse to get reassurance. We're ruminating on these things. Of course, talking to others goes one step further than rumination, and that is a type of shared rumination where you're doing reassurance seeking by talking with other people. But even just being stuck in your head, you can often, in some way, make your anxiety go back down. You think about something that encourages you, or you neutralize the bad thoughts in your head, or whatever, and the anxiety goes back down. But guess what? You haven't gotten back down to baseline. You've only gotten back down to the beginning of the curve. And so, in 30 seconds, or 30 minutes, or maybe 2 hours, the thought comes back. Maybe in the same form, maybe in a slightly different morphed form. And you're back to your place of anxiety again. And it gets so bad, you're like, I can't handle this anymore. I need to get in my head. I need to figure this out. You kind of check out of your work at a 40% level. You're kind of still doing your work, but then you're also in your head working on it. And you ruminate, and you get the intensity of those thoughts to go back down until 30 minutes later when the thought comes back. And guys, this is the loop that we go through over and over. This is the OCD loop, that we are constantly reaching our point of max capacity to handle these uncomfortable feelings. And then when it gets bad enough, then we do a compulsion. The compulsion is a patch. It's a temporary fix. It puts us back somewhere near baseline, but not off the curve. That's part of the reason why rumination is so addictive, because it appears to help. It does kind of help in a short-term sense, although it's not actually fixing the problem. Now, this point right here, I call this your threshold of tolerance. This is the point at which you say, I can't take it anymore. I've got to do something to solve these icky feelings. And so that's where the loop comes up to. Now, you might think to yourself, well, if I can't get out from this loop, how about I get out the other end over here? And I would say, yes, that is absolutely the case. But you can't go straight across to there, unfortunately. The only way out is through the curve. You have to be able to sit through the curve without going back to zero again. You do not want to go back to the beginning, because if you go back to the beginning, you're just dooming yourself to constantly living on this loop. So what do we have to do? We have to go all the way up over the crest and down to the end of this curve. Unfortunately, almost nobody can do that on the first time without building up into it. This is kind of like a marathon. You have to train yourself to be able to run a marathon with your OCD. And that's why, at least in my experience, and I've seen this in many other people as well, we have to slowly begin bumping up our threshold of tolerance, little by little by little. And this is why, well, there's a couple reasons why, but this is one of the major reasons why there's a big dropout rate in OCD treatment. I'm not a therapist. I have never claimed to be a therapist, but I see lots of my clients who come for spiritual coaching are therapy dropouts, and they could not handle the whole therapy experience. This is a big part of it. right here is because you are going to feel a lot worse before you feel better. There's no way of getting around that. It is what it is that we feel awful in the OCD recovery process. And the logic behind it is that we are raising our threshold of tolerance little by little until we get to the crest of that curve. And when you get there, it is amazing. It is such a blessing. It is so wonderful because guess what? Your anxiety will resolve itself all by itself without you doing anything at all. You just have to climb that hill and then let everything else take place on its own. How do we do this, practically speaking? Raising our threshold of tolerance comes through delay, a delayed response. That's really the essence of everything I'm talking about. You want to ruminate. I know you do. You want to think about it. Go ahead and think about it. But before you think about it, before you ruminate, I want you to delay yourself as absolutely long as you can. Now you say to yourself, oh, well, right now my threshold of tolerance is about 1 minute. That's as much as I can do. As soon as I start getting thoughts about my salvation or about hell or about blasphemous thoughts or whatever it is that's bothering me, I immediately, like within 1 minute, I have to get in my head and jump on it right away. Otherwise, I'm afraid it's going to get out of hand and it's going to get worse. And I know, you're right. You're right. It will get more intense if you don't do your compulsion. And that's ultimately what I kind of want you to do. But step by step, okay, little by little. So if 1 minute is your threshold of tolerance, then you just take those baby steps and you say, I'm going to delay 3 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. I have so often looked at the clock when I am tempted to deal with something and I'm like, oh man, I just need 5 minutes with Google. I just need 5 minutes to look up. But it's never just 5 minutes with Google. It never happens like that. It always snowballs into a much bigger thing. The more you research, sometimes you get even more anxious the more you do that, and you never actually receive any of the benefits that sometimes come with compulsions. So many times I've looked at the clock and I'll be like, you know what? I will go and Google this, but I'm going to just wait until 2:00. And then at 2:00, I'm going to do it. Guys, this is a very manageable thing that you can do right now today. If you're already like, oh, actually my threshold of tolerance is like 30 minutes. I'm okay with doing 30 minutes. Okay, then stretch yourself to 1 hour. Go a 1 hour delay and then a 2 hour delay and then a 6 hour delay. Often, not always, but often I see that when people are able to go half a day or a full day without responding to that need to ruminate and compulse, oftentimes by like the 12-hour mark, they are seeing the benefits of this curve. And I've said this many times before in some of my group settings, and I'll just say it to anyone on YouTube that's watching. You will be so thrilled the first time it happens that you find yourself right here at the end of the curve and you have no idea how you got there. You're like, oh, you know what? I was really scared about something this morning around 8 a.m. when I went to work, and now I came home for the day and I don't actually remember what I was worried about. You will be so happy because then you're going to realize, oh, I just stuck it out through the day without responding. I was delaying my response. And here I am at the end of the day. I'm still alive and I don't remember what I was anxious about. It'll be wonderful. Or maybe you do remember what it was you were anxious about, but it just doesn't seem like a big deal anymore by the evening. And I have heard maybe this is an encouragement to you. I've heard so many really sweet, beautiful stories where people will tell me that they went through this curve and they were so anxious sitting with that icky feeling, and they get out to the other side. And there's often at the end of that curve, there can be like this lingering sense of, I did it. I'm here on the other end. I don't feel anxious anymore, but I feel kind of empty. Like maybe I should have been, because the OCD wants to keep coming back and bothering you. And so sometimes there will be like this secondary wave of, you didn't respond. You're a bad Christian. You are negligent. And like, it'll just be like another set of issues that because you didn't respond to the first problem, now that means something really bad. Maybe God's not happy with you because you were being irresponsible. And then I've heard all these sweet stories where people are in that space and they're like, God, I'm trying to get better from my OCD. I don't know if it's the right thing to do or not. I think I'm supposed to ignore these thoughts, but I'm not really sure. And then it's in that space. So many people have told me that God just meets them there. And there will be like a sweet, beautiful answer to prayer that they're like, I know that was a God thing. I know that was God hearing me. Or maybe just some little event that for other people might seem little, but for them, they're like, that was the exact thing that I needed to hear from God. I know that was a message from heaven for me. And God will do that for you. Ask him to do that for you. Because sometimes we just need that encouragement to keep going and recognize, like, I'm a little bit baffled about, like, am I really supposed to be doing things like this or not? I hope I'm doing the right thing. And then you push through and you do what makes the most sense and what seems to be biblical, and you get out the other side. And then God is there waiting for you at the end of the marathon, like waving a banner of his love over you and saying, my child, you're doing a good job. Keep going. So I know, guys, I just want to end by saying this. I know that OCD recovery is not for the faint of heart. It is so, so, so tough. But please, keep your eyes open for how God is meeting you in that space. And this is a very actionable point. I want you, before you click away from this video, I want you to fill in the blanks with what is your current threshold of tolerance? How many minutes is it for you? And I want you to challenge yourself this coming week to bump that up. If it's 5 minutes, I want you to go to 10 minutes. If it's already 10 minutes, go to 30 minutes. Try to get the very best quality delay that you can and see if that's going to help your spiritual rumination. Okay, thank you for watching this video. I just want to let you know I do have a free cheat sheet, a downloadable checklist that you can get for discerning the difference between when you're in your sound mind versus when you're in your OCD mind. What we talked about in this video is number 2 on that list. So spiritual rumination and confusing thought patterns is one way that you can actually begin discerning, hey, I don't think I'm in my sound mind. I think I'm in my OCD mind. So if this content resonated with you today, go ahead and click the link in the description below and you can get that free cheat sheet. Download it, print it, put it somewhere. If you're like, I'm freaking out, look at the list. It can be so powerful just to have a quick checklist of like, okay, everything on this checklist feels like what I'm going through right now. So apparently I'm in my OCD mind and I should just ignore myself right now. So see if that cheat sheet is helpful for you. Also, if you find this content helpful or encouraging or instructive to you, please consider subscribing to my channel. It does help with the production of more materials. It does help with YouTube's algorithm just to let people know that this is relevant to people who are similar to you, and it will share with more people who have similar interest profiles as you. We want to get the word out about religious OCD, so please consider subscribing if you'd like to support. Thank you so much. God bless you. Keep hanging in there, and I'll see you back in a future video.